Good morning, and rise and shine, America. We are here at COABE Adult Education and Family Literacy Week, Rise and Shine, our podcast. This is day 3 and super excited. Thank you, COABE, for hosting this, and a big shout out to our physical host, RTI International, who's giving us some space the entire week. Wow, it's day 3, and it's just been remarkable. I've been here in Washington all week, but I've been following all the awesomeness going on across the country the entire week. And I got to tell you, it's just been just ridiculous. We have so many people that are having legislative meetings, proclamations, events, student involvement. And I just want to kick off today with a do you know or did you know? So I want everyone to understand the importance of this week. And as I said, every day I'll continue to say it, Adult Education and Family Literacy Week should really be Adult Education and Family Literacy Day, and it should be 365 days a year, because it's so important that we get this messaging out. So when this week ends, don't think that the work stops. And in fact, we know that the data and the statistics are staggering. 75.1 million Americans are low skilled in numeracy. 51.5 million are low skilled in literacy. 43 million people lack basic skills to compete in the workforce. 30 million lack a high school diploma. Yet colleges and 63% of all jobs require at least a high school diploma. And 28 million people lack the basic digital literacy skills to operate a computer. Those numbers alone tell an unbelievable story. But we've had guests on throughout the week that have really highlighted the work being done across the country. And I want to thank all of our guests every day who've just been jumping on and participating, sharing. And I promise you today that we have 3 more guests that are just they are the rock stars of the adult education world. And I'm so grateful to have them on today. Before I get there, and our first guest, I'll be bringing her on screen in 1 second, I just want to give everybody a heads up that after Rise and Shine today in the podcast, that at 11 o'clock, COABE is going to be having the getting started with artificial intelligence in adult education, and it's learning tools about ChatGPT, like all those questions you have out there for artificial intelligence. Want to get you on to check it out. And then at 2 o'clock are our Legislative Champion Awards. So you want to get on for that as well. So looking forward to those things that are coming up. I don't want to waste a lot more time because our first guest is Deborah Kennedy, and Deborah is Executive Director at the National Coalition for Literacy. We call it NCL. And Deborah, good morning. How are you? You want to jump on screen? There you go.
Good morning, Jeff. I'm well. How are you this morning?
I'm super well. Thank you so much for taking some time out for us today. And I want to kick us off by just getting started. So people that work in the education field, unless you live in Little Shell, you've heard of NCL and the great work you guys do. But can you talk a little about the National Coalition for Literacy and what you do and what your mission, what drives you?
Sure. So NCL is the umbrella advocacy organization for the field. In terms in particular of advocacy at the federal level. We are an organization of organizations. So our members include COABE, of course, Pro Literacy, TESOL International, RTI, and a number of other organizations. And we work together to advocate for and advise Congress and OCTAE and other parts of the education department on adult education and family literacy. And our goal is to keep those topics and the importance of adult literacy in particular in the public mind through our work with Hill staff and education department staff and labor department staff.
Which is just so important. I often say it takes a village. You have the village, like you are the village. You're like bringing, like COABE, a lot of partners to the table, everybody there, hearing what's going on in the field, keeping your fingers right on the pulse of how we can do better for our students, for our teachers, for our institutions, and putting all those pieces together. And we're going to dive in this today and talk about some of the issues that are challenging all of our adult learners, as well as our instructors and teachers and administrators today. And I guess I want to start off by asking you, like, what's high on your radar screen? Like, what are the things that we should be centered and focused on when we talk to our communities, our friends, our colleagues, our legislators? Like, what are the things that are most important for us today?
Well, the NCL, Jeff, has an approach to advocacy that is asset-oriented or strengths-oriented. So we do talk about the needs, the things that you were citing as your introduction, but we also talk mostly about the power of adult education and family literacy to strengthen individuals and improve their lives, and to strengthen through that communities in which they live. So we present adult education as a critical part of everything that Congress wants to accomplish, that we all want to accomplish in terms of strengthening our communities and making our country stronger. So that's really top of mind, is to keep that positive, strengths-based, asset-based focus in our advocacy. In particular, right now, we're looking at a couple of pieces of legislation that are coming up in Congress once they get through the budget and appropriations process. The first one being the Adult Ed Works Act, which was introduced in the last Congress, and is going to be introduced again in this Congress. That is a series of adjustments, edits to the current WIOA legislation, particularly to WIOA Title II, which is the Adult Ed and Family Literacy Act, that provides funding and support for our education programs across the country. Some additions and changes to that to make it more responsive to the needs of the adult ed community. And then the other piece of legislation that we're watching is the Education Sciences Reform Act, which also is likely to be introduced in this Congress, not necessarily going to for sure, but we hope. That's the act that established the IES, the research branch of the Education Department. And it mentions every level, every aspect of education except adult education. So
Wow.
the big change we're advocating for through this legislation is to simply add the phrase adult education and family literacy into the ESRA, the Education Sciences Reform Act, so that we are called out specifically, and the Education Department, therefore, is directed to provide funding, research funding for adult ed and family literacy.
So I want to back you up, because first I want to go back to the Adult Education Works Act, because I love the act, and there's a lot of pieces to the act, and a lot of things I think can really help the field. Professional development, there's a whole bunch of things that are contained in it, but one of the biggest ones is a passion of mine. One of the reasons why I'm here in Washington this week is working on the IET and corrections project, and IETs are just make so much sense. So for the public that's out there may not be totally aware, an IET is integrated education training, and that's where you have a math teacher teaching fractions in or near a classroom where a carpentry teacher is teaching carpentry, and you're going to throw in some workforce development preparedness stuff on top of that, and it just makes so much sense. It's like the perfect model. And I'm wondering, are you seeing IETs taking hold in the field? I know the Department of Ed's making them a priority and trying to get this model out, and wondering what NCL has been thinking about and doing in this space.
Yeah, I agree with you completely about how much sense IETs make. In fact, that's a model that comes to us from the field of English for speakers of other languages, where that kind of joint instruction in content area material and language has been going on for a long, long time. IETs, yes, are growing across the country, and the Education Department has highlighted some places, including Arizona, for example, where IETs have been very strong in reaching folks. And it's a model that makes a lot of sense to our adult learners too, as I'm sure your audience knows. So it is growing, and the Education Department, Octay in particular, has provided the guidance that the field needs to understand how to make those programs grow and develop. And they are focused very much on professional development for teachers who are initiating IETs in their programs.
I love it. Definitely a model. If you don't have an IET, you got to check out your state regulations. But if you don't have an IET in your area, it is just an incredible model, and it really works for adult learners because it's really contextualizing learning and making it easy for people to get into a career pathway, which is really the ultimate, that pathway to success. I want to talk digital equity and Digital Equity Act for a little bit because we've made some huge strides over the last few years, which with the implementation of the Digital Equity Act. And I know I sit on the Pennsylvania Broadband Commission, and we're going to be a lot of RFPs are being drafted now, and funding's going to be coming down in the next few months, where to really provide digital access as well as digital education, digital support. And I'm wondering what NCL sees as maybe the strong things of the Digital Equity Act, and maybe some things we need to be on our radar screen.
Well, I think the real strength of the overall act, the Infrastructure Act, is its inclusion of the Digital Equity Act, which talks specifically about instruction and guidance for adults to help them develop their digital skills and make those a part of their ongoing education. So I agree with you, Jeff, that's a really important part. It builds on the BEAD program, which is the program that provides funding for actual physical access to digital resources. And so it's overall, it's a whole package that act provides. The most important thing from our perspective is for adult education to be at the table when the state plans for digital equity are developed. And many states have done that. The state plans are now available online. And so you can look for your state and see what your plan includes. But those plans in each state were developed by a number of different organizations, those that provide the hardware, those that provide the software, and those that are involved in teaching digital skills and developing digital skills. And very, very important for adult education to be at that table and be participating with those other partners in providing digital access, digital equity for our folks.
So that is just a super good point. And what we're seeing in the field is they're not necessarily taking up the offer. And I'm really pleading with everyone out there. If you see that there's a community meeting talking about the Digital Equity Act, you need to go to those meetings. You need to inquire, how can your organization be at the table, be part of those discussions? Because, quite frankly, there's a great saying that if you're not at the table, you're being served as the meal. And we need to be at the table in these situations, these issues, especially with the Digital Equity Act, because RFPs are going to be coming out in the near future. And again, we want to be really intentional about how it can help our students, and being there and having some voice in those decisions are really what's going to drive this act to success. So huge fan of the Digital Equity Act. I think it's a game changer for adult learners because there's so many resources and tools that are through computer that people can use now. And if they just knew how to do it, and they knew how to cut and paste and log in and get a Gmail account and all those cool things, super important. I want to go off a little bit on advocacy, because I know you're an advocacy-based organization like COABE is, and I'm curious. I struggle a little bit with when I run into instructors and students, actually, even learners, and they say, Jeff, I'm just not a big advocate. Like I don't know how to do it. I don't know what to do. And I think there are some really easy tools that are in everyone's toolbox to be an advocate. And I'm wondering, at NCL and the work that you do, how is it that you'd like to see people get active in order to move the needle, to make change happen?
Well, you're right, there are a lot of resources that people can use. COABE has some excellent advocacy resources. The Educate to Elevate program that COABE has. Pro-literacy also has an excellent set of advocacy resources, and so does TESOL International. And on the National Coalition for Literacy website, nationalcoalitionforliteracy.org, you can find some guidance on how to do different types of advocacy and how to do them. We have, as I was talking about earlier, we have this asset-focused approach to advocacy, and on our website, we do have a sort of little instructional piece that tells you how to put together an elevator speech, advocacy speech, so that when you run into someone who is interested, or even if they aren't interested, and my friends can tell you, I always talk about this, whether they care or not, but how to quickly interest someone and connect someone with the idea of adult literacy in particular, and why it's important, and how changing the picture so that fewer people are in that lowest category of readers that you were talking about earlier, and more people have access to adult education, how changing that can make such a difference for our communities. So I encourage everyone to get on the websites and do a little poking around for those advocacy resources, and think of yourself, you're an advocate no matter what your interest is, what your profession is, what your personal interests are. You're an advocate for something. Maybe it's your kids in school, or maybe it's your health, but you're an advocate for something. So how can you take what you do in that context and apply it to advocating for adult education and family literacy?
So I'm going to give you one other short one, which is just the stories. You know, educators have stories. We all have them, and you just never know how impactful that story is when you go in to meet with a legislator or a legislative aide, and you're talking. This world gets smaller and smaller every day. And when you can connect people with their home states and the actual learner and share with them the story of how they overcame barriers, and gosh, those connections are so, so important, and they're impactful. Those are the things people remember. And that's the one thing I think everyone has in their toolkit, no matter if you're an administrator or if you're a teacher or a student. Tell your story, get it out there. I was in a meeting with Senator Casey's staff yesterday, and we were just talking about where we're from Philadelphia, and one of the aides mentioned, the lead aide, lobby aide mentioned she was from a suburb of Philadelphia, and it turns out that my mom, who's retired, used to work in a doctor's office, and she knew my mom getting immunizations all of her life. Her whole family went in. My mom would go in and she'd make sure they were calm and gave them lollipops and all that stuff as the office manager. And there was just such a connection. And we went out, when we walked out of the room, she said, Jeff, stay in touch. Let me know what's going on in the field. I want to hear from you. And those are the relationships that you have just by starting conversations and sharing stories.
For sure.
Super
Stories
important.
are stories. You're absolutely right, Jeff, that stories really have that power to connect to people. But you need to also, as you're advocating, you need to have a framework to set them in that takes the story beyond the individual you're talking about into the larger context of the community, and how we need to address this for everyone, not just that one person, but for everyone, in order to move the entire country forward. So I would just suggest that keeping that framework in mind.
I love it. So we are here this week is Adult Education and Family Literacy Week, and I've been asking people all week to kind of give us I've been handing out my magic wands. It's my magic pen in front of me, but on my magic wand, I'm going to give it to you this morning, because I do want to hear from people, like, you know, if you could change anything and this week and really get the message out, what is it that you want legislators, you want the general public, you want everyone in America to know about adult education?
Well, I want everyone to know, to believe in their heart that adult education transforms lives, that it really makes a difference. And I would like for everyone to understand that adult education needs to be as important to us as K-12 education is. It needs to be recognized as an essential resource that every community should have available to everyone who lives in it.
Wow, that's just a great message. You're getting a lot of hearts on that one, popping up everywhere.
I like that. Yeah, that's great. Thanks,
That's
folks.
awesome. There you go. So, Deborah, I just want to give you a big shout out and thank you. If people want to get more information about the National Coalition for Literacy, how can they do it? Where do they go to?
Quickest thing to do is go to our website, nationalcoalitionforliteracy.org. And you can also contact me directly if you'd like information about membership in the NCL or what we do. Deborah.Kennedy@key-words.us.
I love it. I love it. So we'll make sure we put that in the chat box so everybody has it today to take with them, and we'll be able to share it out throughout the podcast, which is going to get rebroadcast. So we'll save it and make sure it gets out to the field. I want to give you a big thank you for not only all the work that you do at NCL, but just being an advocate in the face of adult education in America. You know, the ball moves, and the ball moves because of people like yourself that are up on the Hill and here in Washington, you know, really making sure that legislators and everyone really understand the importance of adult education and the impact it has in our country. So Deb, thank you so much for all you do, and congratulations. We're looking forward to, hopefully I'm going to see you later today at some events here in Washington. And there you go. So we'll thanks again, and we're going to move on. We have two more guests coming on very shortly. One is Marilyn Pitzulo, who is she's just amazing. We've been friends on COABE, and through the work at COABE, she's the innovations chair. I think she'll be hopping back on, and I saw her on there a minute ago. And we also have somebody coming in live, and Nicole Klues is on her way in. We're just waiting for her to come in the studio where we are today, so we're going to give her a second. I want to give a shout out to our COABE fellows. So if you are a COABE fellow and you have you should have the link to jump on today, I want you to kind of jump on that link and come on, because I want to hear your stories. I know we have a bunch of fellows that are on that are watching the podcast today. The State Advocates for Adult Education Fellowship Program through COABE is just one of these remarkable programs where teachers and administrators are really spending a year to understand better how to be a good advocate for adult education. Like, what does that mean? And how do I do it? How do I hold a legislative meeting? How do I write a proclamation or get a proclamation drafted? How do I go up onto Capitol Hill? How do I do all these things that I've never done before, but that can really be a game changer for for changing adult education, like, and sharing the importance of adult ed. So I'm hoping that you will take, you know, if any of the fellows are on, but they're doing some great work. There's a Padlet that I believe is public and maybe on COABE's website. And if it's not, we'll make sure it gets on there, that actually logs all of the legislative meetings and all of the legislative meetings and all the proclamations and things that are you know, that we do through the fellowship. And I'm going to tell you something. I saw it the other day and it looked like a Christmas tree. It was crazy. There were so many proclamations and just being received from mayors, from senators, from governors. I know we got one from the governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, who sent in one. So much, but it's so impactful because these things they're small little pieces of a big puzzle that when you put them all together, just send the message of how important adult education is across our country. And it's really getting recognized. Look, we made a lot of gains last year when we talked about you know, getting additional funding, which COABE and National Coalition for Literacy were so impactful in like pushing the ball forward on. And I know that somebody put the Padlet in. Thank you. Somebody put the Padlet in the chat box, so you can check it out there. But it lights up like all these this great work that's being done around the country. Really super important to understand that it does take a village, and it's one of the reasons why COABE and NCL are such important parts of the adult education community and really change, because they bring everyone together. They're bringing parties together. I should also mention that COABE has a state association leadership institute. We call it SALLY, and our SALLY partners across the country and our state associations are just so important in making sure that change happens at the state level. It's at the state level, we know that that's really where the rubber meets the road, right? At the state level, we are getting our state funding. We're pushing that's where our classes are. Our students are local. So hitting our state associations, being part of them is super, super important. You need to, if you're not part of a state association, jump on, become part of a state association so that you can jump in the pool and become an advocate, share your stories and get things out. Super important. A few other things. I know Nicole's on her way up because just got a note from security that she passed security, I guess. But there are a few pieces of adult education advocacy work that should be on your radar as part of your discussion. At the federal level, the Adult Education Works Act is super important. And I want to give a shout out to Senator Jack Reed. Senator Jack Reed and Senator Todd Young from Indiana are two that have supported this bill and are sponsoring the bill. It's just really important to be aware of these things like the Adult Education Works Act, which is going to promote things like IETs and changing professional development in the face of professional development, and a lot of other initiatives that are contained with it, like having a community navigator. So I think our next guest is here. Let's check her in. Nicole, come on in. We're operating in the hot seat. We are live, so good to see you. You can sit over here. So Nicole Klues is not only a friend, but she's Senior Education Director at Safal Partners. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
I think we got you on camera. Okay. How you doing?
I'm good.
There's your microphone
the
right
BC
there.
traffic, Happy Tuesday, everybody.
We're just glad to have you.
Yes.
I see Marilyn's on too. Marilyn, we're going to get you in a little bit, so you can just go for a minute. We want to get to Nicole because we actually met last year at this podcast, and you came in and you were interviewed, and we just had such a good time. We were wearing our yellow glasses. I don't know. I forgot mine. If I could have found a store around here that had them, I would have bought a few pair, but it's good to see you.
Good to see you.
How are you? So can you start us off by telling us a little bit about Safal Partners and the work you guys do?
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Happy week. And Safal Partners is it's an interesting consulting company, and we're at the nexus of workforce and education. So we do a lot of work with the Department of Labor, within registered apprenticeship, and then we also do a lot of work within education for Texas Education Agency, U.S. Department of Labor. And what's great about our work, and when we're talking about adult learners right now, is that nexus between workforce and education, and really creating those pathways towards successful and gainful employment. And we're on the cusp of that, which is really exciting work.
So can you believe it took us this long? Can you believe it took us this long? And I think they're asking to talk right into this microphone.
Oh.
There you go. Can you believe it took us this long to make the connection between adult education and workforce development?
No, right? It's like the pathway. It's the connection.
Yeah, it's just crazy. We are we're definitely at a place where we need to be doing more connecting those dots. And we're so grateful for the work that Safal Partners is doing. And full and complete disclosure, I'm a consultant for Safal Partners, and I do some work on the IET and corrections project. So, and I love every second of it. So we're here for We're here for Adult Education Family Literacy Week, and I keep saying, it's the one we celebrate it for 1 week. It's got to be a regular event.
Yeah.
And I think we do a disservice by thinking that adult education advocacy is only 5 days. It's got to be every single day. But from the perch that you sit in and the work that you do, what are the things that are most important for legislators and for others to know about adult education?
Yeah, and I think I love what you said, Jeff, about this is a week that highlights this, but this work should happen every single day. And looking through the lens of adult education to various employment pathways, they're an untapped large resource in many ways when we're looking through the lens of how do you map education with various local workforce needs. And I think legislators need to be cognizant of these amazing students and looking at the needs of the local area. And then how do we partner with adult educators and by we, I mean local industry, to create those pathways for direct lines of employment. And we talk a lot about it through the lens of pre-apprenticeship and registered apprenticeship. And one of the things I love as you talk about IET is educators. I'm with you, educators. I've been an educator. There's a lot of things thrown at you in so many ways and different terminology and resources. But how can we speak the same language through the lens of the IET toolkit and create a pathway for students and map IET to pre-apprenticeship and registered apprenticeship? Adult learners are coming in. They want to learn skills to get employment and, all these various needs. And if we can speak the same language and map it out, man, what a win.
Yeah, so thank you for that. So I put you on camera because
Oh, okay.
I think people are tired of seeing me. So we're gonna
Hey,
focus-
everybody, might be
There-
tired to see me soon.
There you go. So when we talk about workforce, though, the reality is that in order for people to get something more than that entry level position, there just needs to be that basic educational foundation, that math support, that reading support, that digital support that really can get them positioned to not only take the frontline worker, but to also take the supervisor and then move up that ladder. It's so important to have that chain. I think we're doing a better job at integrating workforce into our education systems, and IETs obviously are one way of doing it. What are the other things that you're seeing in the field that you think we want to be shouting out and letting legislators know about?
Yeah. So one thing I want to add when you were saying the digital skills, literacy skills, math skills, it's also how are students empowered that way too, to like have that self-efficacy. Like, not only am I going to be this frontline worker, but then I'm going to go to do the next thing, the supervisor role, and maybe the next thing. And I think as we talk about it through the lens of education, how those are tools for empowerment. And when somebody's empowered, like, watch out. They're going to continue to go and be motivated in the direction that taps into their passions. So
so I love it. I think we don't give enough space to that mindfulness piece, right? Of really understanding the impact that adult education has on individuals. And it's everything. It's attitude. It's that I call it swagger. I get students that come in, Mr. A, just passed my test, I'm moving on. And they just have this little thing in their step, that just says, I can do this, I got this. And it's really hard for students, sometimes a lot of marginalized populations that just didn't fare very well in K-12. And now coming in, and we were talking about this yesterday in the IT project was, that testing and test anxiety is kind of a real thing. And for especially people that didn't fare so well before, and now they're coming back and they're realizing, their future could be hinging on this test or this exam. So very real. And I know you're into mindfulness, and I love it. I think we have to do more of that and more of that integration, where the Digital Equity Act is coming into play. And I just can't emphasize enough how important the Digital Equity Act is in my mind. And I'm curious, what should we be doing? Like, should we all be popping up digital computer labs now and making sure, we're seeing a lot of funding will be coming down the next few years for digital equity and digital access. And I'm curious from your perspective, where should we be focusing on?
Yeah, and I love that you asked that question, because one of the projects we're working on at Safal through Octay, and we're collaborating with JFF and World Ed, is a digital resiliency in the American workplace. And I think when you talk about the lens of resiliency, that goes also through the lens of that empowerment. And I have the ability to do that. Anybody can learn anything with technology. It's just time and resources and support. And again, building up that confidence to try new things. And I think through the lens of it's the Digital Equity Act, right?
Yes.
Okay, through the lens of the Digital Equity Act, how do we continue to integrate these digital literacy skills within the classroom and within on-the-job training? Because it reminds me of, I have a long history in education. I've been in higher ed, K-12, adult education. And back in the day, before technology was infused in education, and we're still working on that, and COVID accelerated that, but it was like tech over here, computers over here, instruction over here. And it's like, no, it's teaching and learning right now. This technology is a tool to teach and learn, just like your textbook's a tool, just like this resource is a tool. And I think the more it's infused within the classroom to differentiate, meet students where they're at, empower them, because this is the world they live in. Whenever you go to apply for a job, where are you applying for the job? Where are you signing up for benefits? It's a skill needed not only to succeed in work, but to succeed and connect in life, healthcare. So I think the more students get support and it's integrated and they build up the confidence and know, like, there's new updates all the time. Like, we're all learning this together. Like, who knows with ChatGPT and AI next, in a couple of years, Jeff, I could be hologrammed in here. Who knows, right?
That'd
but
be nice.
I know, that would beat the traffic jam, I'll tell you that. But I just think it needs to be infused in what we do to accelerate teaching and learning, and also, again, through that lens of empowerment and self-efficacy. Students build that muscle, they're building that muscle. It's not something they're scared of right now, because social media has people on it, that's
Yeah.
tech, right?
We've been talking a lot about advocacy this week, and one of the things I'm trying to is a big message for me is at least telling the story.
Mhm.
I often speak around the country, and a lot of times, it's really not the content of what I say, it's the stories that are behind it that people listen to. So you've been in the field for a long time. Are there any stories that you have that really resonated with you, that stick with you and kind of drive you every day into the work you do?
Yeah, there's several stories, but I like to always go with what pops up first, because I
Okay.
could have analysis paralysis,
Go
right?
for it.
But when I was early on in my teaching career, I was working at a community college in St. Louis. And I'll never forget, I had this one student, and his name was Devon, and he was so motivated for school, but he was carrying all the stigma of K-12 and how he was labeled. And he had the skills, but his mind was getting in the way. And so I worked with him to continue to empower and just show him, you have the skills, like, you're dependent on me to, like, say good job. No, you got to eventually, like, know yourself, and just to see his work and to see him grow in that self-confidence. And I was early on in my teaching career, so it was just like, at first I was like, can I do this? As educators, you want to do your best work, and just seeing him continually empowered with education, but also just with how he felt about himself, and then could access those resources, and how he really was changing his story, which can change his life.
Yeah, I think as educators, we often think that everything resides within our four walls of our classroom. And the truth is that oftentimes persistence occurs outside of the classroom. It's making sure people have a way to get to class,
Yeah.
that they have diapers for their kids, and
Yeah.
housing and transportation, and all the things that are the barriers for learners across the country. So there's a bigger game in this. We want to get messaging out to legislators and to at all levels, both mayors and city council people and federal legislators. What's the message you want or you think our teachers should be sharing across the board, across the country?
Yeah, and I think one of the things is our adult learners have all of these skills, and again, can be an untapped resource for many of the local needs. And I think when you're within this labor market, you talk to one group and it's red hot, the other group, who knows what's going on with the labor market. But I think, what is the local industry, what's going on locally, because local matters. Like, obviously national matters, we all know that legislation matters, but what's going on locally, and how do adult programs connect with local employers and help to create those pre-apprenticeship, registered apprenticeship pathways to set more students up for that direct line. And when you talked about, a lot of things that happen outside of the four walls, and, real life issues that interfere with coming to class, with coming to work, and also through the lens of funding with pre-apprenticeship and registered apprenticeship, there's support for those things as well, to ensure students have some backup, a place, I can't think of the right word right now, but a place, like a soft landing when life comes up, because life happens. Daycare issues, finances, transportation issues. So how do we provide that support? And I think going back to the main call is, again, students and these opportunities within the local workforce, and how do we continue to build those connections, and that not only ripples up locally but throughout the state, and that ripples up federally, and same thing with federal policy, that ripples down to the students sitting in the classroom. So it's that connection, that knowledge, and we're all rowing in the same direction to build that vision and get there.
Absolutely. That's just really well said. I'm curious too, we've talked a little bit about, the advocacy pieces and what change looks like, and how you effectuate it, getting involved and really being there. In the work that you do, Safal's into so many different things, but you said something before that kind of struck me. We haven't really talked a lot about it, which is the term apprenticeship. And I'm really excited that we're having these discussions now. I think in the adult education toolbox kit that I see and that I use, I think it's probably the least used tool in the entire toolkit. And Can you tell us a little bit about why apprenticeships are important and what
Mhm.
Safal's doing in that space?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I talk about pre-apprenticeship and registered apprenticeship, it's how to build local employer pathways. So as a student gets classroom training and on-the-job training to earn a credential. And when they're apprenticeship, there's finances, there's a paycheck involved, and as you're earn to learn, right?
Yeah.
And the one work, which is really exciting, is we partnered with COABE and we did a survey and there were 1,250 respondents. And what we were trying to see within the adult education field is, what is your knowledge of registered apprenticeship? What resources you need to accelerate the integration and adoption of that? And how can the Center of Excellence support you? So Safal Center of Excellence is working to expand access to registered apprenticeship at the national level and state level and local level. And we do that by building a variety of resources and technical assistance and also connection, and then to inform policy as well. But the one example that's very applicable today is our work with COABE, and we have a draft of a report that we synthesize the results of that. And then out of that, we have resources that are currently available that educators can, when this is published, not yet, that educators could use.
That's a teaser.
I know, build it up. But also what's exciting is the center's building then around that, what are our future TA products? And it's going to be anywhere from trainings to toolkits, and also a place to create collaboration, because there's some good stuff happening. And how do we facilitate and create the space so the good stuff ripples up? Because I don't want to continue to reinvent the wheel when you're doing it so well, right?
Yeah.
So how do we share this information? And then of course, we'll have a place where we disseminate it nationally so everybody can access this. But we're really excited about this report. It's in draft form right now. I'm hoping when we get all the approvals, then it will be published. We'll be sharing that with you all. And it already has resources within it. And then we'll lay out the roadmap of those future TAs.
Absolutely awesome.
Build into that toolbox.
So tell us,
More
how
tools.
we wanted to get a hold of Safal and stay in touch with some of this great stuff, the work that's being done. How
Yeah.
would we go about doing it?
Yeah. So check out our website, safalpartners.com. But the Center of Excellence is a really great, great tool. And that's one of our projects I was talking to you all about. And we also shared during the past 2 COABE conferences some resources. And the last one, we did an IET framework for pre-apprenticeship and registered apprenticeship. And basically, again, through the lens of speaking the same language, building that roadmap so people can see that connection. And that's on the on the website. And it's I don't have it memorized, dolcoeapps.com.
There you go.
Oh, I need to chat it.
We'll make sure. We're gonna
Okay,
get it in the
sorry.
chat. We'll get it in the chat before.
Okay.
So thank you so much for being here. So I have one last favor
Okay.
to ask is you are you and I, we've worked a little bit together,
Uh-huh.
but we have one more guest, and I want you to stay with me
Okay.
and help me talk to our next guest, Marilyn
Ooh.
Pitzulo.
Okay.
So I'm going to change our camera around so I can get both of us on here.
Okay.
And we are Marilyn, give me 1 second, but we're so glad to have you on. Let's see if we can get Nicole in there. There you go. You got both of us, Marilyn. How are you?
I'm like fading into
Perfect. Thank you so much.
That's all right. It's all good. So Marilyn Pitzulo, first of all, COABE Innovations Chair, Association Chief Workforce Strategy and Design at Indiana Department of Workforce Development. I could read your bio and CV, but it would take us the rest of the show. So we're gonna stop right there. You were just amazing. I so appreciate all that you brought to COABE and to the field. And I was wondering if you could first introduce yourself and tell us a little about the work you're doing.
Thanks, Jeff. As Jeff said, I'm Marilyn Pitzulo, and for the purposes of what we're talking about here, I'm going to say that I'm the State Director of Adult Education in Indiana. I've been in that role for 7 years, but I've been in workforce development for over 13 years now, most of it within adult education. But in the past few years, I've worked in this role a little more holistically, and I now also oversee strategy around WIOA Title I and Title III, which is wonderful, right? Because then I can work to plug in our Title II and our adult education system into that, full WIOA system. So that's who I am. That's what I do here in Indiana.
All right, so you need to back up because you just threw a lot at us. And you get two hosts today, so I love it. So you feel free to chime in. Anything rings a bell. But can you back up your work with Title I, Title III? Can you explain what that involves and why that's so important to the field?
Of course. So we know that in adult education, every state is a little bit different in where their adult education agency program is housed. Many are in K through 12, some are in the community college or technical college system. In Indiana and in approximately, I want to say 10 to 15 other states, adult education is housed within their workforce development agency. And so that's how we are seated in Indiana. That came about in a move from the Department of Education, from our K through 12 system over. And within the Department of Workforce Development is our Wagner-Pizer or our Title III WIOA career counseling system, as well as our WIOA Title I training partners. So Jeff, to answer your question, now I get to take a little bit of a step back from adult education and look at that workforce system in Indiana a little more holistically and help to pull levers and develop strategies that will meet the needs of not just those students that we serve, but also those very important employer partners.
So I gotta tell you, so Nicole, you can't see her smiling and get any larger because it's the work that Safal's doing as well. And it's just so important to integrate employment in this whole discussion and make the connection between education and really what its purpose is, really driving people to that career pathway of success and making them, really happy. I have so many questions for you. I guess the first is, I was reading a little bit about more digging deeper into you a little bit, and I noticed that one of the things that struck me was your work with so many adult learners over your career, probably have touched over 6,000 learners. So I want you to, we have a lot of people on, a lot of people are going to be watching over the next week. I want you now to tell us, what's the secret sauce? Like, you're doing this and you've been doing it so well. So what do our instructors and educators and even administrators out there, what do they need to know? What's the secret of making this successful?
So I'm going to say that it's one of my favorite episodes from the series Ted Lasso. And it's the one where Ted talks about staying curious, right? Not being judgmental and staying curious, because there are so many things, and our learners have so many skills and so much to offer. If we will just stay curious and really connect with them on an interpersonal basis, we can help pull out of them skills and success that they never thought that they had. So I think in Indiana, that is part of that's part of what we talk about all the time is, we begin with the end in mind. So the end may be a job, but it is a specific student in that job. And so how do I start working with that student from day one, thinking about that end? And how do I help, build that relationship, become that trusted advisor so that they will always be there to come back? You asked in the previous segment about great stories. Some of my greatest stories are students that we have served in adult education. Maybe they've gotten their high school equivalency diploma and they went, yay, I'm done, I'm out of here. And then slowly they come back because we've been that trusted advisor and they know that we can help guide them into that next step. That to me is true success.
So first of all, you have now a fan for life. So I'm a huge Ted Lasso fan, but you quoted Walt Whitman and I often use it in my slide decks when I speak. And the quote was, be curious. And then underneath it, it says not judgmental. And if we could all live by that, I wake up every day thinking that those thoughts, because it's about asking questions like, what do you need? And our students, if we really ask the questions of why students do certain things, I think we'll really be shocked at the answers. I remember as an adult educator, I was a director of a Title II agency in workforce development, and a student wasn't coming to class. This about the same time every month. And after sitting down and spending about an hour with the student, I found out and became aware of period poverty and the challenges of period poverty for women. And I was off my radar screen. I didn't know, but I was so curious about it. Like I needed to understand it. And I was fortunate and blessed that with the stroke of a pen, I really could help solve some of that problem for most of the places that we were working in. But the truth is, it wouldn't have happened unless we asked questions. And that's what we need to do as educators. We were just talking about this, Nicole and I were just talking about the fact that, the classroom is beyond the four walls where your desks and chairs are. It's often on the outside that cause students not to persist and not to come in. So we need to dig deeper and do that work. And it sounds like in Indiana, that's really part of your purpose and embedded in the work you do.
It is. And actually, we started asking questions when we started seeing a decrease in enrollment. And this was back to pre-pandemic. So it was not the pandemic that was causing this decrease in enrollment. And when we asked that question of our educators, we had a really hot job market in Indiana and they were all working. Now they were all working in entry-level jobs, right? But everybody was working and they didn't feel like they could allocate resources, personal resources to also coming to school at the same time. They knew they needed that high school equivalency or they needed to learn English, but they just couldn't fit it into their schedule. And so that's when we established the Workforce Education Initiative. And we began putting adult education classes on site with employers. We work with employer partners. We served over 180 employers last year. And it's customizable to the needs of the employer and the needs of the student. So is it English language you need? Do you need them to understand safety and quality? Is it basic skills? Is it the HSC? Whatever it is, we will come in and we'll work and create that curriculum. That has given us the opportunity to serve students that we might not have otherwise served. So I think, again, it's just asking those questions when you see something, asking a question, why, and digging down into it.
That is just a ridiculously awesome model when you think about it. I had a project that we led with Marshall's TJX in one of their distribution centers. They had thousands of employees there, and they had ESL classes that they gave people a few hours after work shift to go and take part of the ESL class or a digital literacy class or whatever, or HSC class, whatever it was. Why is it that in our country we believe just because you get a job that is always that education stops? Someone gave me one of those wrist bracelets that says education never stops, and I wear it all the time. I'm like, that's it, man. Education just should never stop. You should be learning all the time. And that's crazy good. Advocacy, and we're here for Adult Education Family Literacy Week this week, and I know you guys are doing some great work in Indiana. Can you give us some guiding principles or things we should be doing to be better advocates?
Yeah, so, I think many know that, we struggled for many, many years. As good of a program as we had in Indiana, we did not get that recognition from our state. And so here a couple years ago, we decided that we were going to make a change. And what we did was we had to figure out how we were going to tell our story and share our successes in ways that would translate to our key stakeholders, in particular, the governor's office and legislators. And success stories were great. We had a plethora of success stories, individual program success stories. But we found that our legislators and those key stakeholders really wanted more, and they wanted to see evidence of success. So we started asking questions and we dug very deeply into our data. It caused us to make some programmatic changes to improve our outcomes, but it also set us up to be able to tell the success of what adult education does in Indiana at a very reasonable cost to those stakeholders that we're trying to advocate with. And so on Monday, as a part of the showcasing the value of HSE, the new campaign toolkit, and I hope everybody will go get that. It's fabulous. I presented then on a document that we created for our biennial session. And I said in that document, I aligned the 3 different programs that offer similar services in Indiana and gave some key data points that legislators could look at. I didn't say one was better than the other. It was just the facts, man, just the facts. And so they were able to make their own decisions about those programs. So you're asking for key, you need to know your story. You need to know what you're good at. And you need to be able to share that, not just with narrative, but with data.
So that's just that's crazy good. It's really good stuff. You know, being able to tell and share those stories are just it's so important for us so that we can make change happen. One of the great resources that's out there, and everyone should be aware of this, in the Educate and Elevate toolkit from COABE, if you go onto the website, they have actually fact sheets for every single state. And guess what? They're free 95. They don't cost anything. So just get onto coabe.org and check out those Educate and Elevate. If you click on it, it'll pop up and you just check out your state and see what your data is and see how you're doing nationally. It also has the NRS data that shows where your state falls in against other states in the country. And that's pretty remarkable as well. Mm-hmm. Like, we're giving you the toolkit. We're setting the table for you. It just doesn't get any easier than that. Marilyn, I want to thank you. If people want to find out more about what's happening in Indiana and the work that you're doing, how can they find you? How can they find your program?
Sure. So in.gov /DWD will get you to the DWD website. But all of our email addresses in Indiana are very, very simple. It's our first initial last name at dwd.in.gov. So reach out to me anytime, and Jeff, I'll be happy to put my email address in the chat.
That would be awesome, because I know people are going to be reaching out to you. You're just you're amazing. Thank you for all the work that you do on behalf of all the students, the 6,000 plus and the hundreds and thousands you don't even know about that you're impacting. So keep up the great work. I look forward to continuing to work with you in COABE, and thanks for jumping on today. We appreciate you so much.
Thanks.
I know. Yeah, so thank you for that. We're going to be calling it a wrap in a minute or two, but Nicole, I'm so grateful to have you here. And I'll be honest, we were interviewing Marilyn, and I didn't realize I had my headset on, so I
heard parts of it.
There you go.
I heard the good parts, Marilyn. Stay curious, less judgmental, and backing up those stories with data.
There you go. We're going to be we will be sharing the podcast out so that everybody can see it and watch it again. If you missed an email or a connection, we'll make sure you get it in the feed and in the chat box. So thanks everybody for joining us. We're going to be on the next 2 more days. So tomorrow, we'll be on again at 9 o'clock, sharing the great events that are happening tomorrow. And there's a lot going on. Tomorrow is another full day. And then Friday, I want to call out 2 special events. One event that starts at 1 o'clock. And as some of you know, I'm the moderator for the Links Community of Practice for Correctional and Reentry, the Correctional Reentry community. And it's links.ed.gov. So if you're not a member, you need to join. But on Friday at 1 o'clock, we'll be doing a whole wrap up of AFL week, but really thinking about the justice community, those men and women that are working behind the walls and students behind the walls of our prisons and jails, and how we can advocate for them. What are the things that we should be getting on our legislators' radar screen as we push that ball forward? So tune in at 1 o'clock, and then stay tuned, because right after that, COABE is going to be having our state association fellowship program, our SAFE program. We're going to be doing a podcast after that. We're going to be catching up with everybody on the week, and we're going to have all our SAFE fellows on sharing their awesomeness of all the things that have happened during the week. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. And she's been on this whole time, but Lindsay Lord she's the big C, the COABE C behind the scene, but Lindsay's been doing a great job at keeping us all organized, keeping us on time. And I want to thank everybody for joining us, our SAFE fellows. We're just about out of time, but we're going to see you again tomorrow at 9 o'clock. So I hope you join us then. And I'm going to I know I goofed this yesterday, so I'm gonna take my time today, make sure that I get it right, but I'm gonna share our out song today so we can here. And thanks everybody. We will see you tomorrow.